Hello, everybody watching on our YouTube channel or to the people in our lovely Discord server. Welcome to our second Discord voice acting haven interview event. And this time we have a lovely, lovely guest known as the voice for Meguru Bachira in Bluelock amidst so many, exactly over 60 plus different anime titles and over multiple more throughout live action movies, throughout so many amazing properties. We have Drew Breedlove, man. Heck yeah. How you doing, brother?
Dude, I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. All right, so if you are not in the Discord already, once again, watching this on YouTube, what are you doing, man? This Discord's so fun. Everything that we do here is free and accessible to you guys. So if you like what we do, if you like this interview, please feel free to join the Discord. The link should be in our bio. But with that said, man, first question, tell the people more about you, man. Tell people more about Drew.
All right. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Drew Breedlove. I am mostly known for Meguru Bachira in Bluelock. And then I also play Mitsuki Kiryu in a show called Windbreaker. And I play a whole bunch of other anime boys and a whole bunch of other shows. And like you said earlier, I do on camera stuff. So I've done multiple commercials. I did a Hallmark movie. I've done quite a bit. And I've been acting for almost 15 years now, which is pretty wild.
Jesus, man, almost, longer than I've been alive.
Well, I do have a lot of gray hair.
Oh man. Well, you know, honestly, bro, 15 years. Holy crap, man.
Yeah.
Like that is a long time to be doing anything, and I feel like that acting particularly, especially within the fields of on camera and voiceover and amidst other things as well, is just it's so special, man. Congratulations, brother.
Thank you, brother. It's crazy. I've been acting literally half my life, which is wild.
Jesus, man. Well, hell yeah. Well, to our first official question, I know a lot of folks have this aspect when asking people about things. What was their journey like when they first started out? And we're going to tap into that where you got started off in voiceover, but particularly for this question, this is something that we ask everybody. But nearing the start of your career, what would you say were your top three most vital canon events that contributed to putting yourself in the position you are in today?
So the first one was in fifth grade, and it's kind of what started it all. Was I watched my first ever Ghibli movie, that is Nasta, the Valley of the Wind, and I fell in love with the art style so much that I actually took art throughout middle school for the next 3 years. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to be a Japanese animator, whatever. And so getting into high school, my mom was like, well, why don't you try for theater? And I was like, well, I'd never acted before, I'll try it. In my high school, we actually had a junior varsity and a varsity theater program, and I did theater all throughout my freshman year, and I was like, yeah, I don't know if this is for me. And my director was like, hey, you're gonna like audition for the upper classes, right? And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, you're gonna audition for the upper classes, right? So I ended up doing that. I took theater and I did it all throughout high school, and I fell in love with it, and so much so that actually right outside of high school, I was going to do the whole go to New York, try for Broadway, stuff like that. But I actually had an uncle who was in the film industry. He had been a part of it for 45 years, and he was what they call a props master. So he was in charge of the whole props department. And his generation, he worked on like The Goonies, National Treasure, Lethal Weapon, Free Willy, stuff like that. And he was like, "Hey, man, you should try for film." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So I got an agent. I started doing commercial work and things like that. And I'd been doing professional on camera for about a year or two right outside of high school. And then um, uh, my old church was doing a musical, and it was Fiddler on the Roof for those of you who like musicals. And 2 days before opening, one of the cast members got sick, and they asked me to sub in. And it turns out the director of that particular musical was friends with the upcoming director at Funimation at the time, and he came and saw the production, and he asked a few of us to audition. And the first time I had ever done voiceover work was at Funimation. They had to call me in early to kind of coach me through how it worked. But luckily, like I said, I'd been working professionally up until that point, so it was just a matter of like translating it. And that was at the tail end of 2016 when I started with Funny, and it was on a show called All Out, which was a rugby anime. It's a really good show if you haven't seen it. I really wish they got a season two, but ever since then, I had been doing bits in Walla, and then Bluelock Bachira was actually my first major role. So, and then the rest is history.
Heck yeah, man. You know, you tapped into a couple subject topics where I feel like they were pretty interesting to kind of go a lot more deeper into, particularly when it comes to the translation of acting from
Yeah,
on camera into voiceover, particularly anime, right?
yeah,
Because as you know, voiceover is such an incredibly vast field, tapping into multiple different genres, but particularly the translation of being an on camera actor to then acting within the confines of doing anime. Could you describe what was that process like for you and how well, your acting abilities from being on camera and being on set did translate into doing anime and just doing dubbing overall?
well, it's very interesting because between theater and film and voiceover, I mean, they're all acting, but with theater, you have a live audience. If you mess up, you got to be able to roll with the punches, and then it's also a lot bigger over the top because your audience is like a bajillion feet away, and then on camera, you have to learn to be subtle because the camera is like 5 inches from your face, and you've got all these people around you, so you have to be able to like really be in the moment. And in my opinion, I feel like voiceover is kind of a mix of the two because obviously, or specifically voiceover with anime is kind of a mix of the two because anime is so well, it's anime. It's very different. It's very over the top, and a lot of people don't realize this, but anime is very loosely based off of kabuki theater, which is also very expressive, very over the top. So being able to do that in the booth is very important. And with me, I was very very fortunate because my on-camera class, which I actually took with Mike McFarlane for about a year and a half before I knew who he was. He's the voice of Master Roshi. He also, was a director for a long time. But my on-camera class was very cold reading heavy and very improv heavy, and so I noticed that really, really helped in the booth, being able to cold read stuff and then just being able to like wing it on the fly. And that also helps, I find, in film too, because I noticed when I'm on set, I did a commercial a few months ago, and the director looked at me. He was like, "Hey, man, I'm kind of nervous." I was like, "Why?" He's like, "You're working so fast." He's like, "We actually are finishing almost an hour and a half, 2 hours early today because we thought, and just because, and this, whenever you're in the booth, you're just so quick, or used to getting in one or two takes that it's like, that becomes the norm. And so it's very interesting how it's affected my other mediums of acting as well. But it's cool. I love it all. Acting's acting.
100%, man. And, particularly diving into the conversation of anime, because I feel like that there's so much about what we do in the booth, the process of how things are being done, that doesn't really get shared or shown much to the public, or at least understood by the public in a bigger way. So would you say, what would you say, especially when getting into anime, were some of the hardest parts to pick up amidst doing anime throughout your career?
What would you say are some of the hardest roles that I've had, or is
Oh,
that
well,
like?
like the hardest parts of the process of just doing dubbing.
I think it was so, especially in the beginning, because of the fact that I wasn't used to the speed that we do it. I think that was a really big a learning curve for me because I was trained on, especially with on camera, like you take your time, you take those pause, being in the moment, things like that. With dubbing, we don't really have that. You have that more so with like video games and stuff, but with dubbing, you have to match the flaps. It's very very time sensitive, and depending on the line, like sometimes we have to cram like so much into such little time that you have to really kind of pick and choose, like how what nuances you want to take throughout the line and things like that. And I think that was very difficult for me. But once I, got used to that, I was able to kind of play around with it a little bit more. But I know in the beginning I was very, very stressed out about that. And someone who actually helped me get out of that was Jeremy Inman, who has been around for a long time. He's awesome. He gave me my first really big paragraph on a show called Saga Tanya the Evil, which I'm very excited for season 2 of that one. But and he kind of walked me through it, and I was able to kind of break it down, and from there, I noticed that I just got more and more comfortable as time went on. But it was very much I've been learning on the job, and the speed was really probably the biggest hurdle I've had to overcome.
Man, no, 100%. I feel like that once again, there's just so much parts about that process that, can slip an actor up, especially just first getting introduced to the scene, particularly with dubbing.
Yeah,
It's almost just like balancing multiple plates while also doing a dance, while balancing a ball in your head. You're doing so much things at once. It's almost juggling, to metaphorically put it. But to
yeah.
connect this into my next question, one of the biggest things about you as an actor, particularly with voiceover, that I fucking love is how vocally flexible you are. Particularly, man, with your role in My Dress Up Darling, that when I was in, and this is a funny story, going in the booth to record for that show for Walla, and I think I told you this before, Rig pulled me and some of the other guys aside and were just like, "Hey, I want you to guess who this character is, or and who the voice of this character is." And I'm like, "Okay." So we hear it, and I start listing off like, known female actors. I'm like, "Yeah, this. Drew Breedlove." I'm like, "No fucking way, bro. No fucking way."
Oh man.
So, to connect this into my next question, how does your voice come into play with voiceover? Because it is a very common theme or very common thread within this community that we say that acting is the priority with these
Yep.
characters. And I believe that as well. But I
Yes.
also believe that, the voice, authenticity, when it comes to the voice that we're bringing to our characters, the voice that we're connecting to our roles, also can play a part into how that character is created. So, how is the voice of these characters that when you go into the booth and you're doing these voices for these characters, how pivotal is that for you within the process of doing and performing these roles?
So for me, when I when I approach a role, it's very funny. I actually come up with the voices. It's one of the last things that I come up with. First things first is I always research the character as a whole, like to see like kind of their background, where they're coming down the line. Like I'll look at the manga a lot to see where they're going and things like that. I did that with Bachira. I've done that with a lot of my major roles. For those of you that are fans of mine, like you know that I don't read the manga. I'll know major plot points just because I know to know what's coming down. But I keep a lot of the minute details like a surprise when working on them, just because it keeps it fresh working on it. But the voice is actually probably one of the last things that I said. I mean, obviously, like as I'm researching, I'll play around with it and be like, oh, they could go this way. Oh, they could go that way. Like with Bachida, I knew pretty much immediately he was going to be high pitch, and obviously Amane or Chitose, excuse me. When I first heard him, I was like, oh, he's really high pitched, and that was probably the highest I've ever gone because he's like Bachata, but like 2 octaves up. And so I was really pressing the highest register of my voice that I could go, and I've never chugged so much tea in one session because man, it was vocally straining. But it was a lot of fun. He was definitely one of the most challenging characters I've ever had because of that. But I really think like you said, voice acting is just that. It's acting, and I think the problem is too many people focus on doing funny voices and they don't focus on the acting aspect. And I think it should be the other way around. I think you should like if a voice comes out of it, that's great. But I really think the acting is first and foremost the most important thing, of anything. Because people when they hear you for the first time, a lot of people like that's the voice of that character, right? No matter what. It's like, with Hayden Christensen, right? I could never imagine anyone else being Anakin Skywalker, right? But if someone else had been cast as that, then obviously I would never imagine anyone else. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. Like the
Mhm,
first time someone hears or sees something, that becomes the character, right? So I think really, but the most important job for us as actors is to make sure that the character is believable, right?
mhm.
And I think that for me personally, that's what I put on the top of the list of importance.
100%, man, and I honestly would happen to agree. I think particularly with anime, a lot of folks, especially when we start out, get very caught up in that vocal aspect, like, "How anime can I can I get?" You know, kinda like that
Yeah,
meme.
like, oh man,
But
this is great, guys. Like that kind of thing. Yeah,
Man, without a doubt. But now with we talked about anime, for too long. Fuck anime. But let's move away from anime at least for the
cool.
time being, and kind of
Yeah,
more bleed into what I really do love to talk about, particularly because it's not really talked about as commonly as I hoped. Commercial.
yeah,
The commercial game, especially with your experience
yes.
doing commercial for
Okay.
on camera as an
Mhm.
actor, how do you approach either commercial auditions or just commercial opportunity in general in comparison to other genres of either voiceover or just acting overall?
So for me, all the commercials that I've booked, they have been character E, right? Because I'm very much a character actor, and I've come to terms with that at this point. Because I really like I see my friends that book commercials all the time, and man, in my mind, it's an art form in and of itself because there is that like iconic commercial sound, right? And if you have it, you have it, and it's very like I remember doing a workshop with this gal, and she like literally sounded like just went into it. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm in the middle of a commercial right now, right? And so I really think it's a skill that you have to work on, like kind of almost separately, because yes, you are trying to be believable, but you're also trying to sell a product. So it's like the way you approach it is slightly different because I play very real right to the camera, especially to the camera. I play very real, and sometimes that's not always the best thing for a commercial because that's not what they're wanting, right? They'll say, "Oh, we want very real performances," but then I'll see who's booked, and I'm like, "That's not real at all. That's like super goofy and over the top." Like I wish I would have known that. You know what I mean? And but like commercials. I love doing commercials, man. I love being on sets for commercials because they can be very chaotic, with all the equipment and everything around, and the big cameras and the giant cranes and stuff. I love stuff like that. And yeah,
Mhm,
no, it's commercials are really good too. Like, you hear all the time that's where the money is, and it's very, very true. I had a friend of mine. He told me that he was playing. He did Walla. They don't call it Walla. They call it something else in like commercials and animation. But he did like some background characters in some commercial, and he said that he made more money off that than he made in most of his like video game and stuff gigs, and he made royalties off that, which was really wild. And all he was like a screaming kid in the background or something. And I think that was actually like a SAG project that he did. So, and that's the key because SAG projects always pay those royalties and those SAG rates and stuff like that. But no, commercials, it's very fun. It's very it's different in the way that audiobooks and industrials, which for those of you that don't know what industrials are, those tend to be like a lot of like internal training videos and like for companies and things like that. Like I've done several on camera industrials as well. And, just the way you approach those is similar but different. And I know that doesn't help as much, but it's not as, it's real, but it's not because what you're doing is you're conveying, like you're trying to sell product. If that makes sense. I don't know. I hope that helps.
No, without a doubt, man. I mean, bro, like the 15 years of acting experience is really showing just within
Oh
the
shoot.
knowledge of
That's
holy
funny.
man. But yeah, I mean overall I adore commercial too, man. And you talked about industrials particularly when it comes to the the training side of stuff. There's so
Yes.
many aspects about voiceover like IVR or educational or e-learning,
Yes.
that
Hmm.
I believe that not a lot of people either know of or tap into.
Yes.
So my next question is, what are some other voiceover genres that are not really commonly known of that you've either done or would like to do sometime throughout your career?
Well, so that aren't known of, well, I would like to do it, it depends on the audiobook, but I would love to do more audiobooks, but through a studio. Now, I've done some audiobooks in the past, just like a few children's books and stuff. But with those, sometimes they can be very strenuous depending on what platform you go to. Because if you're an actor doing those, you're not just the actor, you're also the sound engineer. So you have to edit all the sound files and you have to do everything like that. And with a lot of audiobooks, they pay you per finished hour, right? And what that means is if the audiobook is 2 or 3 hours long, you only get paid for those 2 or 3 hours, not the 16 hours it took to record it and edit it and stuff like that. You only get paid for the finished product of those hours, right? But no, I really do. I enjoy audiobooks a lot just because I like to read. But I feel like I would rather do them personally through a studio, even though I do have friends of mine. What's really cool is if you want to be an audio or independent narrator, I have friends of mine that are like independent full-time narrators, and the thing with them is they have built a repertoire of authors that like after the author sets out a book, they don't even host auditions for the book anymore. They just go straight to my friends, and so now they have consistent work through authors who know them, and they built this reputation through them. And so that's really cool because you can also do that at home, and if you have a mobile setup, you can do it that way as well. And so that aspect of audiobooks are really, really cool.
Mm,
And I also like audiobooks and industrials too because they tend to be low what's the word, low stress, you know what I mean? Because
mm,
when you're dealing with like video games and like sometimes you're dealing with really big budget productions, you have a lot more stress to like get it in one take, or you're wasting the studio's money and they don't like that, right?
yeah.
Whereas audiobooks, you tend to have a little more freedom, like with you have a little more time to record them. Yeah, obviously, you still have deadlines, right? With audiobooks, but you do have like you don't have to get it all in 1 or 2 takes, right? If you are going back through, you can be like, okay, I can record that real quick. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Mhm. No, 100%. And there's a key word that you brought into there that I would love to tap more into your perspective about, that being reputation.
Yeah.
Because within the scale of doing voiceover or just being an actor, there is the big looming uh, concept that you are essentially a business. And the way
Yes.
that you go about this career is operative as you are a business. So,
Yes.
how much would you say that reputation, building a network, the connection aspect of this industry can play or has played a pivotal part in your own career in order for you to expand your business to other people and other clients that you wouldn't have worked with before if otherwise.
So I will say personally, my reputation has probably played about 98% of my entire career. So the thing is, so I am repped on camera with an agent. But when it comes to voiceover, I have actually built my entire voiceover career purely on word of mouth. I don't have an agent for VA work. I am currently in the process of getting one, which I know people are like, "What? You haven't gotten one yet?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." There's a lot of stuff going on in the background, but yeah, so reputation's really, really big. And I tell people all the time, you're not becoming an actor. What you're becoming is you're becoming an entrepreneur. And I tell people all the time, and they're like, "Well, it's about the art, it's not the business." And I'm like, "Yeah, when you're in the booth, it's about the art, but outside of that, it's about the business." And I'm like, if you're sitting there and like you don't think that like Leonardo da Vinci and all these huge artists weren't rubbing elbows with royals and being like, "Hey, I'll paint your 18-year-old son for his birthday if you pay me X and Y." Yeah, they were totally doing that, right? In the background. But we just see like a lot of their major works that were really successful, but we don't see all the hustling they did, even back then. And it's always been a business, and I think that's the issue that a lot of artists run into. And it's a fair issue because like we as artists we do love our art form. We love what we do, and we don't want to corporatize it, but to some extent you do have to you are selling a product, which is yourself, your talents, and that is it's I think that's a very important and very key aspect to our industry that a lot of, especially newer artists, tend to overstep. And yeah, you got to be very careful with that. But yes, we are entrepreneurs essentially. So yeah,
No, without a doubt. And, bleeding a lot more into that fact, because I feel like that there is, even despite all the research that I've done to find out more about your journey and find out more about your business, I feel like that concept that you brought up towards where people only see the major stuff, like what
yes,
we have done, but never really see the process on how those things were achieved. Folks commonly very talk about the Alex Lees of the world, towards where they've went out and talked about their own process of how they got into it. Sharing in the realms of moving to LA without having anything and really building it up from zero. Or we
yeah.
talk about other people that also have had similar journeys. So for this next question, what are some aspects or what are some stories that you would be comfortable to share within the process of not only just doing voiceover and pursuing the career of voiceover, but pursuing the career of acting in general, that you would like to highlight and share to the lovely people of Arquette?
You know, I think one of the big things that's very overlooked in this industry is like just be a good person. Like I think that's what it really boils down to, because so many people in this industry, and obviously not everybody, and obviously you have groups like this that are really great. But the problem is, and I've run into this a lot, especially prior to Bluelock and everything. Is so many actors are like, okay, I can't talk to you because you'll cost me my role, and that would be terrible, blah blah blah. And I have come to terms with the fact that if I am meant to get a role, right, then no matter what, I will be getting that role, right? And I always use this as an example. I remember there was this guy I was on set with once. I think he was one of the PAs or something, and he was telling me about this commercial that he went out for that he did not want. He straight up told his agent, he was like, "I don't want this commercial," and his agent was like, "Hey man, the producers are really pushing you to audition for this," and he was like, "Okay, whatever." And so he told me that what they wanted was they wanted a picture that defined who you were, right? And so what he did is he took a picture of him from college where he was very clearly drunk. Was wearing like an inflatable duck. He was like half naked. He had a tie, tied around his forehead. Like it was very, not professional at all. And he was like, "Cool, I'll send this in. They won't book me." Guess what? The producers booked him because they loved the picture so much, and he ended up shooting the gig. And it's very like I said, with Bachira, I didn't audition for Bachira. I didn't audition for Kiryu. I didn't audition for most of the roles that I have. I think the only role that I really auditioned for was Yuka Feldio, and I left my A rank party. But even that one, when I auditioned, I forgot that I auditioned right for that one. I had to look it up, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I did audition for this one." But it was like, a lot of the stuff I have booked is, not saying you shouldn't audition, right? But it's just like, don't like audition, don't stress about it. Cause so many, like I even, towards the beginning of my career, I remember I would shoot in auditions and I would be so stressed about that audition for like weeks. I would look at those auditions, I'd be like, okay, I hope I did good. I hope I did good. And then what had happened is it made the acting just not fun, right? Like I wasn't having fun acting anymore because I was just so stressed about booking a role because this was the role that would define my career, right? And it's like, that's not why we get into acting. We get into acting because it's fun, right? That's the only reason you should get into anything is because you enjoy it, right? And when it becomes like you're doing it for something else, then I feel like you never perform at your best. And you see that happen all the time with people that get into music or acting or writing or whatever because they want to make money out of it, or they want the brownie points for saying that they're in this field or whatever. They may find short-term success, but they don't find long-term happiness from that. You know what I mean? And so yeah, I think just be a good person and just have fun with it. Like I said, if you're meant to book it, you'll book it. If you won't, you won't. You know.
Without a doubt, man. And
Yeah.
it's such a crazy thing that it's a common theme miss so many people that I talk to that are actors in this space, particularly when it comes to auditions, that a lot of the times the least confident or the more that you kind of separate yourself from the audition itself, the more likely it seems that we book it.
Yes.
I've had so many times where I've personally have auditioned for multiple things that I loved with every aspect of my being, poured hours and hours into that audition, didn't book it. But the
Yeah.
ones that I just like nonchalantly went in, relied on my skills as an actor, nonchalantly just knocked it out, and then just threw it on the shelf and forgot about it, ended up being what I would end up booking. And it's
Yeah.
wild to see that commonly being placed within so many fucking actors
Yeah.
within our industry and space. It's a cool thing nonetheless.
Yeah.
But let's take it back a little bit. Time machine, start of your career, right? What would you say were through in taking classes, workshops, advice from other actors, would you say was some of the most pivotal pieces of advice that still stick with you even till today?
So for me, some of the best advice I've gotten was so everyone in the beginning really stresses about demo reels, and I've noticed this in the voiceover world too. So my agent, when I signed with him, I was like, "Yeah, I got to get a commercial reel. I got to do this," and he's like, "No, you don't." He's like, "What you have to do is you have to focus on booking the work first, and then taking that professional work, turning that into the demo reel." I think that's a really big thing that a lot of people focus on is demo reels. So much. And the way I look at it is, and even my uncle said this for a long time, is if you have a demo reel made of professional work that you have, right? What that is telling the casting director is, okay, so this company or this production decided to use, like, for an example, we'll use I have an on-camera commercial reel, and if they're looking at my on-camera reel, they can be like, okay, this company decided to pay this particular actor to represent this commercial, right, and pay them to do that. So, and if you have a whole string of companies that are doing that, that tells them, okay, this person is trustworthy enough, is talented enough to be able to, like, you know what I mean? Does that make sense what I'm going at? Like,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Like showing that you already have like you have that air of professionalism already versus, and I'm not saying that like if you go to a studio and you get it made up that like you should be like, oh no, but like there are so many people out there that go to these random studios and they don't do the research and they're like, as long as I have a reel, right? As long as I have a reel. And it's like, no, 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 because your reel can be really bad if you're not careful, right? But if you have professional work, that's stuff that's already edited, that's already been put. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
No,
I'm losing my
100%.
train of thought, but yeah.
No, without a doubt. I think that does make a lot of sense to me. And I've always thought, particularly when it comes to the visual showcasing of work
Yes.
through visual reels, that in
Yes.
our industry and how our industry continues to change as the years go on, I think the value of demo reels, just within the aspect of, going in to the studio and getting an $1,000 demo reel and going through that process,
Yeah.
I personally just find that visual showcase to be more valuable information
Correct.
to a CD, that being casting director for people that don't know the abbreviation, but a casting director or a director or an agent or anyone that would be scouting for opportunities for you, so
Yeah.
that 100% makes sense.
Yeah, to tell people, I've never paid for a demo reel ever. Like I've never had one made up. I've always just had stuff that I've booked and I use that as my demo reel. And I've slowly accumulated that over the years. Because like I started out like where I did enough commercials where I made the commercial reel, and then I started doing enough theatrical. Which, by the way, if you don't do on camera theatricals, like more like your Hallmark movies and stuff like that. So I eventually had enough stuff where I made a theatrical reel, and then same thing with anime, as I had enough for a visual reel, and all that was slowly accumulated over time because your reels grow with your career, right? Obviously you book more stuff, you can add and remove different things, but yeah, no, I agree 100%.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, tapping into more of this, journey, at least, What would you say were outside of just like taking classes? Were some of the ways that you were able to hone your acting ability as you started and hone your acting ability even today?
Um, you know, I find that experiencing life in general is a very good way to just be a well-rounded artist, right? So I really think that if you have time and obviously the resources to do so, I really think you should travel and you should go experience different cultures and things like that. And there are ways you can travel very, very cheap. Like I flew to Hawaii for like $11 because I knew how to rig the system. And I mean, because yeah, there's a whole different thing. I'm really big into traveling, so I love doing that. But I really think as an artist, just experiencing as much as you can outside of your own little bubble is very, very important because it really opens your eyes to different cultures, how different people think, how different people feel, and especially as an actor, experiencing that kind of just having that in your back pocket, being able to draw upon that when needed is very, very important. And I think the problem is nowadays it's like we have this hustle culture, right? Where it's hustle, hustle, hustle. And I think to some extent, I think that's good, but I also think it can be detrimental that if you don't have that checked, because I definitely fell into that, last year, and I burnt out really, really hard. And I'm still recovering from that. And so you have to be very, very careful with that. And so I think you also like, life is a balancing act, like, yin and yang, right? So you have to work hard, of course, yes, but you also have to play hard, right? And both of those have to be 50-50, right? Because if you play hard 49% of the time and you work hard 51%, well, that's not balanced, and you're still eventually going to burn out, and vice versa. And so I think you really, really need to learn, because life is actually pretty short. Like I'm freaking almost 30. It's nuts, man. And you need to be able to also enjoy life, because like if you enjoy life and you're happy in your own life, you also, I find that just helps your craft more because you'll enjoy your craft more. And you also produce your best work when you're having fun doing it. And yeah, so I think just doing that kind of stuff is fun.
Yeah, without a doubt, man. I've always kind of had that train of thought that within all the aspects of what we scribe is the what it takes field of being a voice actor in this space. I feel like the most pivotal is mentality. And having the right mental space when not only just pursuing this career and doing different things, but just maintaining this career, because I feel like that is the hardest part, in my opinion, about voiceover is just maintaining it, just staying within this industry and continuing
Yeah.
to be competitive. So for diving into that sense, what are some things that you have done to be able to take that step back, and really focus on your own mental health, just so that you won't crash and burn, and find yourself in a position towards where voiceover becomes something that you know stresses you the fuck out and is something that you
Right.
completely hate.
Yeah, well, you laugh, but like stressing yourself out about your art form, especially in this day and age, is very easy to do. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but when you become stressed every time you do, your passion, eventually your brain subconsciously will start hating that, because what it'll start to do is it'll start to associate that with stress, and you'll like, even though you like don't want to, you'll start to be like, ah, I don't want to do this audition, or ah, I don't want to go into the studio, even though like you're like you feel like, oh, but I love this. Like this is what I want to do. Because you're so stressed doing it, it becomes like it becomes almost like a chore, right? And so you have to be very, very careful with that, because, like I said, the best work you do is when you're having fun with it, and the worst work you do is when you're stressed over it, right? So some of the things that I've really, really learned, especially this past year, because I've worked on this really, really hard, is just basics, man. So like breathing, learning how to like actually breathe when you're stressed out is actually goes really, really far. When you look at a lot of military training and things like that, especially in training camps and stuff like that, they teach you breathing when you're in really, really stressful situations, and that helps a lot. Something I do as well is I also journal. I've gotten to where I'm not like consistent about it, which is probably a bad thing, but I try to do it more than I used to. I also try not to be on my phone as much. I have started, so I bought a Kindle because I got to a point where I can't read books enough because I just, I have so ADHD. Oh, I've got to send this email and stuff like that. But with a Kindle, what's very interesting is I find that my brain is like, oh, okay, this is a screen. I'm used to looking at screens. I like this, but I can, read a Kindle a lot more, and I start doing that before bed, and I find that my sleep actually gets better because of that, because I start reading a lot more than scrolling and doing social media and stuff. And that leads me to my next thing is I've been limiting social media a lot. And I've started to realize how negatively, like, obviously I like my social media because like I love interacting with my fans and I love, telling them what I'm up to and stuff like that. But sometimes it can also be really detrimental. And especially when you start, like, we all know doom scrolling, right? And TikTok and things like that. And you don't realize how much that weighs on your psyche because, like, your brain is processing all that information that you're quote unquote absorbing when you do that. And your brain's really not designed to absorb that much information. And again, I know I'm talking about things that have nothing to do with acting, but the truth be told, if you mentally can't be there when you go up to the mic because you have so many things going on in the background, then you won't be able to perform, right? And so, if I had to say one thing, I think you should really, really work on your sleep. I think if you get anything, like, your sleep should be the number one priority. Like, I cut off my phone usage an hour before I go to bed every night. Like, I look at my Kindle, and I do specifically the Kindle because it has a different screen than the iPad and the phone, and I find that, like, it's a lot gentler on the eyes and things like that. And I have a nighttime routine that I'm like, okay, I'm getting ready for bed. And the only thing I do in bed is sleep and wake up. That's it. Like, I don't do anything else in my bed. I don't scroll in my bed. I don't do anything like that. And so that way, when my body hits the pillow, it's like, okay, it's time to go to bed. And I find that that really does, it does help, you know, and not only just like, mentally, but like, just like, the fatigue, it's easier to manage, especially like when you start doing cons. That's something that's when it becomes really important because, like, when you're traveling, right, when you go to cons, and traveling, I tell people all the time, I love the fact that I travel, I love it, but what traveling really is, and those of you that maybe travel for business full time may connect to this, but traveling is stress disguised as fun, right? Because the going through the airport, checking in, flight delays, then checking into your hotel, then finding a ride, then if you're going to cons, you're going to cons, and you got to be, there's a lot. It can be a lot, and so that sleep and that rest is very vital. It's almost non-negotiable, you know. And I have friends of mine too that, like, they go and get massages like once every other month. That's like non-negotiable for them. And as you get older, I find that they're onto something, man, because, like, your body really is a temple, bro. And, like, you feel it. I feel like once you hit 27, and prior to this, I was like, oh yeah, whatever. And then I hit 27, I was like, oh, I see what they mean. And so I try to regularly take care of my body because, like, that really does bleed into literally every aspect of your life, including your acting. And for a long time, I was like, man, why can't I connect with the script? Why can't I do that? It's because I was so stressed about everything else. I was getting terrible sleep. I was eating like crap all the time. And I was like, well, why do I feel terrible? Well, the answer is right in front of my face, you know. And then once obviously I'm still working on it, and it is a process. It's not going to change overnight. It's all, baby steps. But I notice the more that you do that, the better you just feel in general, you know. So yeah.
Heck yeah. And, for my last question, and guys in the Discord channel, if you guys are watching it or listening to us in the Discord, as I say this last question, feel free to put your questions in the side chat. Either if you put it up before or you're doing it new, just put your question in the side chat and we'll get to it. But yes, for my last question, and this is, we gotta kick it back to anime, man. I know
Heck yeah,
so many
of
people.
course.
Yeah, we gotta
Heck
kick it
yeah.
back to anime.
I'd
So
be offended if you didn't.
so what I want to hone in particularly, and this is another aspect that I feel like is truly amazing, that I've seen from you through your roles, is your like sustainability, just sustaining your voice throughout doing these long-winded sessions,
Yeah,
particularly for your first lead, Reina Spellblades. Like
yeah.
that shit, listening back to all of that and being like, the fact that you're able to sustain that for that long per episode or even a double episode in other situations is insanely impressive to me. And I
Thank
feel
you.
like that is a skill inherently. So to then say my question without the glaze, how do you go about sustaining yourself in the booth? And what are some techniques that you would give in terms of advice for actors to be able to sustain their voice for longer periods of time in sessions?
So, first of all, always having water with you is an absolute must. If you have kind of a groggy throat or something, I really think you should bring tea with you too. And also, so like like you said, story about Oliver. So prior to Oliver, I had Bachira, which he was very prevalent in season one and throughout Bluelock. So I was like, okay, lead. I feel warmed up. I should be fine with a lead, and very very different, right? Because with a lead, you have the entire show on your shoulders, and so Oliver, and then also Yuka Feldio from A Rank, they both talk in paragraphs after paragraphs after paragraphs. And that can be very vocally straining. And so, um, I would not be afraid, like if I was like, hey, like my voice is really kind of hurting. We've been at it for 5 or 6 hours. And sometimes my sessions would be that of like constant, right? Can we take breaks? And more times than not, the director would be like, sure, yeah, we can take 10, 15, and I would just chug water and tea and stuff like that. And then in the case of Chitose from My Dress Up Darling, I would tell the director, hey, like this voice is like really straining. So if we could split it up into 2 sessions, can we do that? And now that does not always work, right? And especially with video games, sometimes they're like, well, no, we got to get it all in one session. But it doesn't hurt to at least try, right? Because you really do have to take care of your voice. We treat our tools, our voice boxes, very identical to singers, right? And if it doesn't work, then we don't have a job, right? So being very caring to your tools is extremely important, especially those liquids, man. And like I said, if you're feeling really terrible beforehand, like you're stuffed up, or you've got a really sore throat, Hall's cough drops, the lemon ones, are like a godsend, man. They're the freaking best. And then also with like cons, we're talking all the time. So like, just breaks, water, tea, cough drops. Those are big things that I recommend. And again, you're gonna be shocked, but sleep, man, sleep is great, because that also affects your vocal cords. Like when I have a terrible night's sleep as well, I find that when I wake up and go to a session, that my throat is just, ugh, it's terrible. So yeah, take care of yourself.
100%. And now, with that said, we have 10 minutes, well,
Cool.
about 10 minutes. So I'm going to be going through some of the questions in the side chat because we have a
Cool.
couple, and,
Cool.
relaying it to you. So, a question from Alowit. What is your opinion on talent rosters and agencies, as well as how they afflict your ability to get roles slash find work?
Um, so agencies, so for me, I think I'm old school in this sense. I really do enjoy working with agents, because at the end of the day, my job shouldn't be to look at all my I mean, obviously, I double check contracts before I sign them. Right? I mean, that's just what I do. But like negotiating and things like that, my job is to do the thing, right, which is acting and taking care of myself for that. And so an agent helps offset that work. And I actually find that the bigger I get, the more I actually rely on a team to help. Like, so I have multiple agents and managers for my cons and for different appearances, And obviously, I rely on my agents for auditions and things. Whereas like in the beginning, I was hustling, right? I was getting a lot of that myself. The first year I did conventions, I did all the paperwork and negotiating myself. Now I can't do that as much because I have to take my efforts elsewhere. And so I really do like agents. I think when you get an agent though, be very very picky, right? I'm really picky with who I work with. Make sure you research them. Make sure they're legitimate, right? Make sure that they line up with you, right? So like if your friend's like, man, this agent's so great, blah 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 blah, and you're like, okay, and you sign with that agent and they don't work out for you, that's great because like the agent, you find people that you like individually, and that work well with you individually, right? And so, and because what it is essentially it's a professional friendship, right? That's really what it is. And like for my agents, every once in a while I'll shoot up an email and be like, hey man, like how you doing? How's the wife? How's the kids? All that stuff. And so, yeah, I definitely I do like the talent to agent relationship when the agent knows what they're doing. You know what I mean? And y'all are both on the same page, right?
Yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. So for our next question, this is coming from the Bachira fan, Leo.
Oh, hi,
They
Leo.
they're gonna freak out. You're gonna give them a heart attack. So they say, does not hearing the other actors make the process of recording harder? And I think this is for specifically dubbing and for ADR.
It depends. So if I'm doing bits, yes. Or if I'm doing bits and I haven't worked with the actor before, then yes. But now, if you're talking Bluelock specifically, what's really funny is I have worked with Rico and some of the boys so much now that like I can be like, okay, I think Rico's probably going to say it like this, and he's done it the same because apparently Jonathan, who's the English voice director for Bluelock, is like Rico will go in and be like, I bet you Drew's going to say it like this, and then like I say it like that, and he's like, "Oh, call it." So it really depends. You get really good at imagining like different scenarios of like, if a character's not in there or pre-recorded already, but by the time you go in, you kind of just imagine the whole scene. Like for me, I always read the lines prior, right? And then I just kind of act it out in my head, and then boom, go for it, right? The moment before, for those of you that do scripts and stuff like that, that's kind of what I do. And so it takes a little bit to get used to because for me, I was trained a lot in the Meisner method, if you know what that is. And so I'm really big on playing off of other actors and playing off of partners. But playing by yourself too is a great skill to have. You know.
Mhm. Without a doubt. And for our next question, we have a question from Frankie. How can a voiceover artist who's still training to build a reputation of providing quality acting skill? Oh, let's see. Let me restructure this question just so that it's more clear to come across. So yeah, how would you go about building up a reputation in comparison to well, fuck, this is a loaded question. Holy. Let's see. Uh Okay, let's say theoretically you had a reputation of having poor acting quality, or you're just starting out, so your acting wasn't as good when you are marketing yourself to clients and clientele. How would you say someone can go about redeeming themselves through reaching out to these clients once more and providing something better, if that makes sense?
All right. So I'm going to be really blunt on this. Okay, you ready? And I heard this from an agent. I think that is a very difficult position to be in because of the fact the first impression really does matter a lot, and that's why I always say that as an actor, your biggest thing should be building the foundation of your acting first before you try to get jobs and try to do all that. I had an agent tell me that like obviously like um, they'll have people that submit to them and they're just really aggressive about it, right? And so then they start to remember those people as like the really aggressive people. Okay, we're going to stay away from that. But she also did say at the same time, she was like, well, if they're rough at the beginning, and 2 or 3 years later down the line they try again, but they've clearly grown, then she'll be like, okay, well maybe I'll give them a shot. right? But so the key there would be time, right? But
Mm.
if I had one piece of advice, it would be before you shoot your shot, treat it like you've got one shot, right? So make sure that your foundation is set, you know, go from the and then go from there, right? So if that makes sense.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. Okay, we're running through some of these questions here, but we
Sorry,
have
I
one
talk
from
so much.
no, 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 no. It's totally fine. Like I'd rather it be very lengthy because I'm the same fucking way. Like I would literally
Yeah,
spend hours on a question if you would like, let me.
yeah.
So we have a question from Ian Williams. They say, "Hiya. So VO seems more accessible now than ever with the internet and so many remote opportunities. But do you believe it's still viable to going where the work is?"
Yes. So I actually think that more studios are doing in-house more and more, especially with AI being a thing and everything like that. So I think a lot of studios are really wanting in-house more than anything. But I will say this. So the thing about going to where the work is I think you have to weigh your options, right? I was talking to some people out in Florida about this and things like that. One of the best advice that my uncle ever gave me, because I was going to go out to LA, I was going to go do film and things like that, and he said you can do that, but he's like, you go where your face is the most valuable, right? Where you think that you will be the most valuable, not where everybody else is going, right? Because just because everybody else is going there does not mean that that's the place for you, right? Because for me, like I'm a native Texan. This is like my home. This is where I wanted to stay, and so I didn't necessarily want to go out to New York or LA. And I was like, well, I'll build a footing here, and I have, right? But so go to where your face is the most valuable, where you think that like you can really build a foundation. Because let me tell you something. So back when Georgia, it was really, really big for film, and it still is, but I actually had some friends of mine that were booking a lot of work out here, right? And they were like, okay, we're going to go to Georgia because that's where everyone's going, right? They went out to Georgia and didn't book anything, right? And then they ended up moving back. And they said that what happened out there was a lot of the Georgian casting directors were working with a lot of local talent that they had known for a long time, right? And I'm not saying don't try that, but I'm just saying that is something that you should be aware of, because picking up all your stuff and moving, that's a lot, right? That's a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, right? So just make sure that wherever you go, wherever that may be, right, that you really think that that's where you have the most value, right?
Mm. No, without a doubt. Like I would happen to agree. I think this topic is a very hot topic amidst our community in terms of location and if we should move here, if they move here, LA, New York, Texas, like it is a very hot topic. And what
Yeah.
I would always say and put out there is just preparation, man. Because
Yes.
me coming down here to Dallas, I didn't even think it was gonna fucking happen, and I was
Yeah.
the most
Yeah.
least prepared to be able to actually allow it to happen, and through God's will, I was able to make it work, but man, you know, it could have gone very badly in if it was any other way, so I would always
Yeah.
push preparation,
Yep.
very, very importantly,
Do your
before moving.
research, please, wherever you're going. That's a big thing too. And I will say this: there's a lot more states now, because states are getting whiffs at film incentives and stuff like that. There's a lot of work going pretty much everywhere now, and so you'll be able to find certain pockets where they're doing a lot of work and things like that. And that's like a golden nugget in the river. You know what I mean? If you can find those little pockets where not everybody else is going, but there's still consistent work. That's what you really want to try to find. You know,
Mm, without a doubt. And now we're gonna get to a little bit of a speed round. We might hit
cool.
over seven, but
That's fine.
with a question from Alu again. What method did you find to personally improve your range and acting skills the best?
So for me, singing really helps. So I come from a choir background, and I was able. So for Bachira, he sits in my falsetto. For those of you that do music, so it doesn't matter if you suck at singing, but the thing about it is learning to use, because the way that you hit lower notes and higher notes is very, very similar. to how you hit, lower characters and higher characters. And so if you can find like a voice coach, not like an acting coach, but like a singing coach, I think that will help you and do you wonders a lot, because they'll also teach you warm ups that, I still use a lot of my theater warm ups, choir warm ups that I've been using for almost decades now. And so I think that's a really good place to start.
100%. Now we have a question from Melissa. They say, "Hi, Drew. I'm a big Bachira fan. If you're able to share, were there?" I'm gonna reword this question just so that it's more easily able to be answered. But if there was any character that you would like to audition for in Blue Lock or be besides Bachira, who would it be?
Oh man, I'm gonna be totally honest. Nobody else but Bachata, man. I love Bachata. I tell people all the time. So I'm actually a big Bachata fan, and one of the first things I said when I saw him is I was like, especially that first episode, I was like, damn it, I'm gonna be a huge fan of my own character, man. I love Bachata. But if I will say, so some of my other favorite characters that I do like Ryu, who's the glam guy, and I like Zantetsu, who's stupid specs. Those guys are fun.
Without a doubt. Oh man. Okay, so for our final question of the night, we will kick it off to Frankie. But they say, what techniques do you personally use to imagine the other character, particularly in commercials?
Oh, in commercials. So for me, if you're doing on camera, so like I said, my with commercials, I'm only on camera. What I do is I look past the camera, usually to the right or left, and I'll find like a spot on the wall, and I will kind of act to that spot. Like, or for an example, if there's like a plant hanging in the background, or I've got like a manga or something, I'll look at that specific thing, and then I'll act to that. And I find that that makes my eye line like really good. And then also, if you're doing voiceover, I think it would be more or less the same thing. Kind of imagine the other person in the booth with you. Like if you're doing a product, like who are you selling the product to? Like, are you selling it to your best friend? Are you selling it to some random old lady on the street? Like, think about that and then act. Yeah, act to a wall. That gift is everything. Really act to a wall. That's the best thing to do.
Mhm.
So I feel like
100%.
that's really, yeah.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And I lied. I'm gonna have this be the last question because I know they really wanted to ask you something. But this comes from that wacky fellow. What beyond
Cool.
talent do you feel one needs to book work and keep working?
I really think just being humble, being humble and that can take you so far in this industry. Luckily I've been very fortunate. Everyone I personally know and have worked with are very humble people. They're great people, and they're really close friends of mine. But I will say I have been on set and I have been on certain productions where there were not humble people, and that was not fun for anyone. And I guarantee you that those particular people probably never worked with those directors again, right? And so I think being humble and just enjoy being fun to work with, right? Without obviously kissing the feet of the director all the time, or constantly just being there to network. Just being there and just being a joy to work with, I think can really take you far just as an individual. You know what I mean? So that's just do that.
100%, man. And with that, this marks the end of our interview. Man, Drew, I just want to give you a ton of appreciation for showing up, sharing your, experience in the space. How I learned so much just from hearing you talk about like just the nuances within voiceover and even divulging into the on-camera scene and theater scene as well. The advice and the information that you have is incredibly valuable, and I know that everyone here had a really good time just listening to you, brother. So really thank you, man.
Yeah.
So lastly, is there any of social medias that you want to promote, any conventions that you have upcoming, anything that you want to share? Now is the time.
Yeah. So if you want to follow me on socials, it's literally just Drew Breedlove VA. At literally, I have everything. So Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, everything. And so usually I'll do all my convention announcements on those areas, and then roll announcements on there as well. And in terms of conventions, the ones that I'm about to attend, I have not been able to publicly confirmed yet. So just keep an eye on my socials, and I'll be able to, launch those on there. And if you're in the area, come say hi. I'd love to meet you.
100%, man. And with that, thank you.